What's up, hobby friends? My name is Casey and welcome to another miniature rescue. This week, we're going to see if a used Warhammer mini can win a golden demon. And before you write that comment, bring it back up here, hear me out. The answer is probably no, but don't count it out completely. You'll see what I mean. Adepticon came quick this year, and I've been eagerly anticipating the event since the minute I departed last year. Seeing a ton of friends and being inundated with miniature games from morning to night is an absolute experience. Something I cannot recommend enough if you haven't made the trek to the annual convention. One of the premier events at Adepticon is the Golden Demon Painting Competition, put on by Games Workshop. It draws painters in from all over the world, and while it has its ups and downs as a competition format, it's still something where people really put in effort to win. Personally, I know that I'm not even in the same class when it comes to the level of artistry required to win one of these things, and you might even be saying that to yourself if you've been to one. But what's actually stopping you from participating? Even knowing, going in, that you might not make it past the first round of cuts shouldn't be a deterrent for you. And I'm absolutely saying that to myself as I prepare to start working on my own entry. The reason really being is that there's a lot more on offer than the sweet reward of victory. Before we get there though, let's take a look at the model I chose to bring and what I did in order to at least not look like a complete idiot entering into the competition. This is a vampire lord that I bought on eBay a while back for 15 bucks. The paint on the model isn't actually half bad either. The colors are vibrant and fun, but the model's a little bit dirty and just needs to be cleaned off. I'll be using my sonic cleaner filled with LA's Totally Awesome and letting the model soak for a few cycles to really get down to bare plastic. While that's running, here's the first point I kind of want to make. If you want to enter into a painting competition, make absolutely sure that the model you choose is something that you actually like. The model needs to be interesting enough to hold your attention, and even before you put paint on it, it needs to inspire you in just the right way to really help you tell a story. What that story is also important, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Looking at this model, I know for the most part how I want to paint it, and that's usually a good sign for me that I can sit down and paint something for a good amount of time. That being said, I don't actually have a lot of time to paint this model, but I'm going to do my best to put in some effort and make it fun. The model gets stripped down after a few rounds in the sonic cleaner, and I brush away the paint with a toothbrush. Checking the model for mold lines and gaps, I'm actually pretty lucky here that the construction was well done. Any excess plastic or mold lines is a sure way not to make it past the first cuts in the competition. Everything else gets looked over and I get the model ready to prime. Okay, before the paint starts to go down, let me hit you with the second point of this video, and really the entire point. This exercise, painting this model, isn't to win anything. In fact, I know I won't be winning anything. But then again, that's not the reason for entering in the first place. Last year at Adepticon, I talked to so many people who really wanted to enter something into the competition, but the fear of not winning or just not being good enough completely stopped them from even bringing something to put into the case. Even this year, some people that I had talked to brought minis and had done really good work, but didn't want to enter after seeing what was already on display. My question to them was, why not? The main takeaway I want you to have from this video is to at least try. You may not think you're skilled enough. I mean, I know that I can't paint like Sergio Calvo either, but why should that stop you from doing the one thing that can actually make you a better painter? Getting feedback. Guess who hangs out at the Golden Demon booth more than anyone else? The other painters who entered. This means that at almost any given time, although more likely at 2 a.m., you can ask someone who actually has a chance at winning a Slayer sword for feedback on your entry. Granted, they might not always want to give it, but in my experience, the community of people who go to Adepticon, enter Golden Demon, and just generally paint models are some of the best people I've met and would gladly take a couple of minutes to help someone out. I was lucky enough to get feedback from several people that really helped me to see where to go with my painting and the kinds of things that I need to work on in order to improve. Something that, sure, you could probably get online, but in person from someone holding my model, looking at it from all angles. I'm just gonna get better and more accurate feedback than from anywhere else. And like I said, from really good painters who know exactly what they're talking about. With all that said, let's get to painting and I can walk you through where I feel I did alright and where I completely screwed it up. I started with the armor. My main focus before going was to really try and push my airbrushing and make something dynamic and cool. For vampires, I really like that blood red armor, and I'm going to start with a dark red as a base. I'll follow that up with a brighter red, and I'm going to try and modulate the color in a kind of not quite almost non-metallic metal style, where the brighter points are being lit with the brighter color, and it kind of gets cut off at the hard lines of the model. Each piece of armor will get its own set of highlights and shadows. That way, each piece has been touched with paint in a purposeful way, and there was some kind of thought behind it. Finally, small highlights with a brighter orange on the lightest parts of the armor, just to make them kind of shine. I'll also be using that color straight from the bottle as an edge highlight on all of the armor, to separate all of the pieces and make them all stand out as much as possible. One thing I really like about this model is how much it reminds me of Castlevania. Specifically Symphony of the Night, where at will you can turn into different animals or mist in order to traverse the castle. The way this model is kind of mid-transformation looks really cool, and I want to show that off a little bit in the way that I paint. After the armor is dry, I'll bring out the silly putty and mask off the head and hair. Normally I would probably do this in sub-assemblies, but I don't really have time to tear this model apart, so silly putty it is. That does actually kind of bring up a good point though. If you are purposely painting a model for a competition, you might want to take the extra time to separate every piece and paint them individually, unless they can't be, but it's probably a good idea. For that matter, buying a model off of eBay and trying to win a golden demon seems like a pretty far-fetched way to go, but honestly, this is just fun, so. With all of that masked off, I'm going to bring in my airbrush and put down a nice blue-gray, something that isn't too bright so that I can highlight the face properly and not blow out the details. Once that goes down, I'll use a slightly lighter gray from the top to bring in a little bit of color variation, brighter on the top and darker underneath. Now that the face and hair have a good base coat, I'm going to move on to the shield. This is really where I kind of lost the initial vision for the model. I really wanted the shield to be weathered and beaten while keeping the armor pretty clean. Like, somehow this vampire is just too good to be hit, or can just turn into mist at will, and it almost doesn't really matter. But when I started to work on the shield, I was not really getting what I wanted out of it. So I decided to go with something I knew I could make look pretty good, and tie it in with the rest of the model. Old and rusty pieces in contrast to the pristine red armor felt like a good choice, something I knew I could pull off and at least make look pretty good. So I ended up changing the knees and the large shoulder pad and the shield to make them even more beaten up and rusty than initially I was going to. I actually really like how the contrast looks material-wise, and I think it makes for a good story, but where I fell down was in the actual justification for these decisions. Like I said earlier, the story matters, but maybe not in the way that you think. As far as a painting competition goes, and the feedback that I received, this is where the model doesn't add up. The armor looks pretty slick, but there isn't a narrative reason for the rust in the piece itself. Like, you can't look at this model and tell me why part of it is rusty and old versus new and untouched, which is totally fair for a competition, even if I just think it's cool and I would paint an entire army like this, because I would. This was actually a huge takeaway from the whole experience. The way the model is painted needs to convey the story of that model in the scene that it's in. And when you make decisions as to what paints to use, the story needs to make as much sense as possible when you first look at that model, without me trying to explain it. That's not to say you shouldn't paint a model like this. I actually do think it looks pretty cool. But from a competition standpoint, I can understand why this wouldn't make all the sense in the world. At this point in the painting process, I was pretty much out of time. I had to get on a plane pretty soon. I did some work on the face with some icy blue shadows, as well as modulating all of the metallics a little bit with that same color, and slapped on a snowy base. I flew to Chicago and headed straight for the Golden Demon line. What happened next was actually pretty surprising. So I entered my mini into Golden Demon. First goal down, I just wanted to get something in the case. I got extremely good feedback from painters like Vince and Scott, and before the judging even started, I already felt like I was going to come back from the convention a much better painter. The thing is, I knew this mini wouldn't win, but I already had. I was able to learn things about my painting, ask specific questions that I've had for quite a while. The things I thought were going to be issues turned out to be the best things about the model, and where it fell down completely makes complete sense to me now, more than ever. So when I go to paint more minis, I'll be approaching each model a little differently. I'll just be looking at it differently and thinking about it differently. And next year, when I enter another mini into the competition, we'll absolutely be bringing something that is better than this one. No matter what skill level you are, it's a good idea just to take the first step. put that mini into the case and see what happens. The worst outcome is that you don't win anything, but you also come away with really incredible advice on how to get better. And on top of that, meet some of the most incredible painters in the world. I had such a good time at Adepticon this year, meeting up with a ton of great friends, meeting a ton of new ones, sharing stories and laughing together, talking about minis, and just enjoying the fact that we're being inundated with the hobby for multiple days in a row. And wouldn't you believe it, my Vampire Lord actually made it through the first round of cuts, and I earned myself a lovely little green sticker. That actually made me really happy and extremely motivated to keep trying to improve and put something in the case for next year. It really goes to show that if you just take the first step, you will absolutely be rewarded for your effort. Sure, it may not come in the form of a trophy, but there are definitely things that are worth just as much. The memories created, as well as coming away with solid advice on how to improve, are more than I could have expected. And it's certainly not out of reach for anyone else. So do yourself a huge favor and just enter. I think you'll come away just as surprised as I did. Thank you again for joining me on another Miniature Rescue. If you like something about this video, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing, as it really helps out the channel. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video.